Om Shri Sai Ram. We will start today's session with three Omkars.
Loving Sairam to all of you. Welcome to the 35th edition of Online Samarpan by Sai students of Mumbai. The topic for today's Samarpan program is The Divine Anchor by Brother Amit Ahuja. It gives me great pleasure and an honor to introduce Brother Amit Ahuja, whom we lovingly call as Bhai, Elder Brother, due to his loving nature in our college days at Puttaparthi. Brother Amit Ahuja was fortunate to be born in a Sai family and remembers attending Bal Vikas from his earliest memories as a small child. He grew up and completed his studies, including Bal Vikas in Delhi. He was an active youth in the Delhi NCR region while he was pursuing his engineering and working thereafter. The divine call from Swami then pulled Amit and his siblings to his lotus feet as his students in various courses in Bhagwan's University. Amit graduated as MBA from the Prashantinilayam campus in the year 2002. The years in Swami's immediate presence marked the most meaningful time in his life. In fact, he credits this phase to have changed the course of life of his entire family, enveloping them in his divine love and protection. During his stay at Prashantanilayam, Amit was blessed to speak and chant Vedam in Bhagwan's immediate presence on various occasions, as well as participate in the convocation drama in the year 2000. Amit now lives in Maryland, USA with his family and is actively involved in the Satyasai education and the Seva activities at the local Sai Center. On the professional front, Amit has been working for more than 2 decades in various roles in the technology and service delivery transformation with leading global technology companies. He now works as a senior director in a global technology services firm in USA. Now, I welcome Brother Amit Ahuja to share his valuable experiences with Bhagwan. Brother Amit Ahuja.
Thank you, Him. My loving pranams at Swami's lotus feet, and loving Sairam to all of you, dear brothers and sisters. It is indeed, I think, a privilege to be at this platform. Kudos to Jay and Siddharth, who have been, who started this initiative, and I have myself benefited from listening to the various experiences of so many of Swami's devotees. It is so enriching, and I'm really feel privileged that I'm here to share some of our my memories and experiences of Swami. And so thank you, Jay and Siddharth, for this opportunity. When so a few weeks back on this platform, we had Brother BRC speaking, and he spoke about that it really is his story. That is the unique part. If we were to write about the biography of some public figure, there is one story, and there is no various versions. But the uniqueness of Bhagwan is that it is not one story. There are millions of stories, which is each seen through the lens of each of us individual, and it is so different, and it enthralls to hear all these thousands and millions of different versions. So it is my attempt today to tell his story as seen through the lens that I have seen it. So when Brother Jay Shankar called me a few days back, and he requested, since I was thinking what really should I be speaking about, and I realized that it's been close to 40 years that I have been cognizant of Swami. I remember I was probably 5 years old when I had started to go to Bal Vikas. And from that time on, I remember learning the first bhajans, Ganesha Sharanam Sharanam Ganesha and Jai Guru Omkara. And at that time, my elder sister, we used to live in a joint family. So my elder sister, she used to play the harmonium for that. And till today, when my elder son plays the harmonium, I still don't know many more bhajans than those two. But a lot of other things have changed in these, roughly 40 years since then. But one thing has not changed. And the one thing that has not changed is that our lives are centered around Swami. Everything we do, everything we attempt to do, our decisions, he is the one centerpiece that is there to guide us, to guard us. And any occasion of our life that I can think of, anything of any significance, we can associate that with Swami, or we can completely attribute it to Swami. So he, in our tumultuous lives as we go around, he really has been that centerpiece that provides the calm and joy to our lives. So I thought of calling it the Swami as a divine anchor. And he's an anchor for also one more important reason. So before that, I see the last 40 years that I, like I said, I've been cognizant of Swami being roughly three phases there. The earlier phase was when he was the God in the picture, because that's how we saw him. We saw him in pictures. We saw him in pictures on the wall, on the table, in calendar cards, and he was that God to whom we could speak to. But that picture really didn't speak back to you all that much. But I think there was something very unique about that, in the sense that when other friends of mine, I remember going to their houses, and they had posters of film stars or music stars or even sports stars, and they could say, we know about them, we know of them, we know about them. But it was really a very asymmetric relationship, because they could not say that that star knows about him, right? So it was a little asymmetric. But I think in this case, the relationship was pretty symmetric. Or it was asymmetric in the sense that Swami knew more about us than we knew about ourselves. But definitely Swami knew about us. I think that was for sure. And therefore, the relationship with the picture or that poster or whatever you have on the wall was very different. It was unique. And then, as time progressed, he gave opportunities, and he actually became the God who is walking in front of you. He's talking to you, he's interacting with you, and you form a very different association with him. He's there in the picture still, but now he's also in front of you and he's speaking to you. And you start to, at first you struggle to kind of put them together. How do they come together? And then when he very beautifully lifts the veil, he pulls the curtain aside, that it is the same God. I am the same person. We are not different. Every picture you have seen of me everywhere, and this form that you see walking here in Prashanti Nilayam, it is the same. So from that murti or that that image or idol, he has become the Prashanti Vasi. And now you fast forward to now, when that form in Prashanti, we don't see it walking, talking in flesh and blood like he did before. But now he is verily the Hridayavasi. And now if I look back, I realize that that was his sole mission, to become our Hridayavasi. He did all that, all the 86 years he lived on this earth, it was so that he could install himself in our hearts, in each of our hearts, so that we could carry him with us as our own Hridayavasi. Right? So I think these are the three major phases I see of knowing him, of associating with him, of really partaking of his love, of his blessings. And I'll narrate some beautiful memories and some beautiful experiences where he reinforced some principles. And those are very good reminders as we go about in my daily life. I really benefit from them, and that is what I will attempt to share here today. So the first thing, as I was saying, is he reinforced is that he knows all about us. And sometimes it is more than we think even we know about ourselves. He knows about us, he knows about our family, friends, whatever you can think of, he already knows that. Whether we know it or not, but he knows that. So this happened way back in 1994. I had actually gone to for Parthi Seva. I was in college and I had gone to Prashanti Nilayam Seva. And at that time, the big incentive of going to Seva was the Pad Namaskar that you got after the Seva. That really was the big candy you were after. That year, Swami had left for Vrindavan by the time our Seva started. But not to disappoint us, a couple of days before the Seva ended, he sent word that all the Sevadal must come to Vrindavan and he will give Pad Namaskar. And I'm just being very frank that was what really had really inspired us for Seva. So everybody and me in particular were really glad that sorry that we will get the chance to get that Pad Namaskar. And from the time that we were, it was announced to us that we would actually get that chance and we had to go to Vrindavan to take the Pad Namaskar. Sorry, just give me. I started formulating in my mind scenarios of how it would turn out. And after a lot of thinking, I had seen Swami giving Pad Namaskar to Sevadal groups, and I used to see that some people, just sat there and Swami blessed, put his hand on their head. A lot of people took things to be blessed by him. They used to take vibhuti packets, photographs, and all kinds of things, and he would bless them. A lot of time, people actually attempted to take Pad Namaskar. But I was really, really fixated on getting the Pad Namaskar. That was my aim. So I decided I will not take anything to get blessed by him, because then by that time, he'll pass by. And those 48 hours, the only thing I was doing was playing out various scenarios in my mind as to how, when he comes near, what will I do? What if he goes away from me? And all that was going on. I was just so very fixated on that. So finally, the day came. We got into buses at very early morning, 4 a.m. We reached Vrindavan. We were told not to go for darshan, but actually go to Gokulam and freshen up, and that he would give us Pad Namaskar after the darshan and interview morning that happens in Vrindavan. And while I remember sitting there in those lines in Sai Ramesh Hall and waiting for Swami, I was so thrilled. I could not hold back my excitement. I was going to get that Pad Namaskar finally. It was 15 years since I had known Swami, and today was going to be the day I'm going to get Pad Namaskar. So as I remember him walking towards there were about 7 or 8 lines of, lines face each other. There were 7 or 8 paths where he had to cross. And as he started to give, bless people and all the other Sevadals, I again started to play those scenarios in my mind as how is it going to happen. And then I had a very, I thought I had a very smart thought that if I'm sitting cross-legged, I can't bend and take Pad Namaskar, because I also wanted to not just get the Pad Namaskar with my hand, but I want to touch my forehead on his feet. So I very quietly went from a cross-legged position on sitting on my knees. And I realized, I made sure nobody noticed it. But I gently kind of moved to that position. And then another thought came to me saying, you're being only half smart. You are wearing spectacles. You can't actually touch your forehead. Your spectacles might fall down, or your lens may hit the Swami's feet. So I quickly removed my spectacles and put them in the pocket of my kurta. I was wearing a kurta pajama. And then I thought, now I'm set. Everything is set. And I had taken a very vantage position. Again, I had thought through this a lot. So I was sitting on the end of one of those lines because I had thought that if I have to get a good darshan, he has to slow down. Or my best chance was if he slows down, and he slows down when he's crossing over from one line to the other. So I'd taken a position at the end of one line. And luckily for me, he started, the way he was crisscrossing, he would actually start and enter that line from the other side. So I would actually see him coming towards me. So everything was perfect until he came about 5 feet from me, and, he was smiling. And as he himself is, he really enjoys giving darshan and blessing people and the joy in people's faces. And he suddenly gazed up, his gaze locked with mine, and his expression changed. And it became very stern. That smile faded away, it became stern. And from the distance, he said, "Hey, bad boy." Now, I can tell you, I had played thousands of scenarios in my mind. This was not one of them, nowhere near. And I was not prepared for this. So I was really jolted, and very sheepishly I said, "It is in my pocket." He said, "Take them out and wear them." And by this time, he had already crossed over and he had went to the next line. So, that was my introduction to him in person. And after he left, when he left, he had blessed everybody, he waved us goodbye, and he went back. I realized that actually, I should also tell you, when Swami went away, a few people came to me and asked me this. "Oh, so Swami knew you. Swami knows you. So how has he known you?" And that was kind of rubbing salt in my wounds. But, it was very apparent that he did know who I was. He knew what I had been thinking, but he wanted to teach me a lesson. And I think that lesson is as relevant today as it was probably, those 25, 30 years back, that you have to wear the spectacles of your discrimination. Don't keep that in your pocket. You know what is right from wrong, but always wear those spectacles of discrimination. From the first time I thought of what he had said and why he had said till today, I'm sure it was nothing different that he was trying to convey. It was that message. But he also conveyed that he knows in and out. He knows what I was doing. He knows what I was thinking. And that was my introduction to him. The other thing that, he has probably left a mark with me is always trying to convey that, yes, he is that beautiful form. We all love and adore that form that gives so much joy to us. But he is all names and all forms. He is verily all names and all forms. And it does not matter which one you associate with. It does not matter which one you really feel comfortable with. It all comes to him. And this is something, where he kind of put a stamp of validity and kind of finally for me, because in those days I used to think, Swami, you are there, but so many people, they either they don't believe you, they don't think about you, they only do idol worship. When you are there, why don't they all come to you? These kind of questions used to be there in my mind. But he finally put shut them all down. When something happened, it actually was one of my elder sisters. She was married into a family, and that family had found solace in a faith, in a Buddhist faith called Soka Gakkai. She had started going to their meetings. They call them prayer meetings. So each faith has some kind of a terminology. So we call, when we sing together Swami's praise, we call it a bhajan. We don't call it kirtan, we don't call it sangeet, we don't call it anything else. We call it a bhajan. There's a name, and we can associate with that name. Similarly, in their faith, they call it prayer meetings, and where they chant the Buddhist mantras. And so she had started to go there. Now her mother, who is my bua, my father's sister, she was the instrument or the vehicle chosen by Swami to pull our entire family, our entire clan into his fold. So she was the first one who had gone to Puttaparthi from our family and seen Swami. And when, somehow she found it a little, my bua, my aunt, she found it a little difficult to accept that her daughter, who had been raised on Swami and was so devoted to Swami, was now actually practicing a slightly different faith. And we all tried to kind of tell her that it does not really matter. But she somehow was not very comfortable with that idea. So my sister wrote a letter to Swami, and she sent that letter in another envelope to my brother, who was at that time in Vrindavan doing BCom. And I think in her mind, she had thought that if Swami accepts this letter in person from my brother, then she will take that as a sign from Swami that he has accepted her going to that faith. Now, she had not told that to us at that time. He just said, I'm sending this letter. Please see if you can hand this over to Swami. That's all we knew. The only thing that was in her inner prayer to Swami that he has to accept that letter in person. So, the letter reached my brother, and he sat in darshan with the letter in his hand. And Swami, true to his form, ignored it for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. He just completely ignored it. He did not do anything to it. And I think after 2, 3, 4 days, the letter was still in his pocket. It went to the darshan. But that particular day, he actually forgot to offer it to Swami. In fact, he had thought that, he was in two minds. He said, Swami is not accepting it. Maybe I should not push it too much. So it was just in his pocket. He just left it there. And he had also kind of forgotten about that it was in his pocket. And Swami that day came up to him and said, he asked for the letter. And then suddenly he realized that, oh yes, the Swami is asking for the letter, right? So he took the letter out. Swami took the letter, and he said only 3 words. And those 3 words were prayer, prayer, prayer. How can there be a better way than this to put a stamp of approval, to say, yes, I know there's a letter in your pocket. I know from whom there is. I know the contents of it. I know the prayer of the person who has sent that letter to me. And I accept prayer, 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 because they go to prayer meetings. And I think, to me personally, that was really a defining moment where, all names and all forms are his. And it's funny that a few months back, I was watching a movie, you all might have seen it on Netflix, called The Two Popes. If you hear their conversation, you verily realize that it is Swami who's guiding the head of the Christian faith, he is the spiritual master of that faith. But even he is guided and prompted by his inner voice in his youth, who actually brings him and guides them to the path. I remember the scene where they talk of the Pope Benedict when he was in his youth, that there was a voice that dragged him inside certain churches or inside certain basilicas. So he is that prompter. We live in our small world that he is that Swami, but we really have to enlarge our field of vision to accept everything as his. And I think that he's trying to prompt us to do that way. And the third thing I think that is really what he has been trying to, I think, cultivate inside us is the strong faith that he has our back. And that's where I think the divine anchor comes. An anchor is something that you hold on to. But our anchor is divine, is unique. It's an anchor that holds on to us. It holds on to us in our most troublesome moments, in moments where we are really, really forlorn, where we feel there is no hope, all is lost, but he is holding on to us, and we have to have that faith. And I think he has time and again through different experiences, through different circumstances, proved that he is there, he is taking care of us. So this is something that happened, I think it was 1998 October, and I would have been in a situation, something happened, and I would have been in a situation that probably would have been injurious to me, in the very least. But only Swami could have kind of just turned it around, and I got out of it just without a scratch. So this is what happened. It was late evening in Delhi. I used to go to office very often in the company transport, because I used to come back very late, many times after midnight. But that day I had to pick up some things from the market, some electrical things. So I had taken my car, and I had picked up everything, and I was on my way back. I was just about 2 kilometers away from home, and there was I was on a red light signal. I was at the very front of that signal, and it's a very long signal, almost 3-4 minutes. And I was just thinking of what was happening around me, right? So in front of me was after the signal was a bus stand, and there were a lot of people crowded around the bus stand, and they were actually craning their necks to see what buses are going to come. And I remember thinking, Swami, you've taken care of us. I feel so privileged that I'm sitting in a car with my air conditioner on. It's hot and sultry outside, and the people waiting for a bus, and they don't know when the bus will come, don't know when they'll get home. And I was in that kind of a thought process was going on. And I'm a very impatient driver. I'm still a very impatient driver. So I was just kind of itching to go and just get home and be done with it. So, the light turned green, and I, started driving. And since there was a kind of a slope with a flyover coming in front, I kind of accelerated. And then suddenly my vision went on to my left side. There was a divider, right? In India, we drive on the left side. So, sorry, on the right side, the divider was there. And I saw that there was a family of 3 people standing on the divider, trying to cross the road. But the man, he was in the middle, and probably the lady, probably his wife, was facing towards me, the car which was coming towards them, but he had his hands, he was holding both of them together. He was probably telling them not to cross. And so I saw him, and I also saw him trying to tell others not to cross. So I didn't really slow down at that time. And then, when the car reached quite near them, suddenly the lady bolted. And she was, it all happened in a split second. She just came in front of the car. And, I think Swami was holding the situation. So I jammed the brakes. I put the handbrake on. I had never prepared for this scenario, but it just happened. The car slowed down quite a bit, but it still hit the lady. And I actually saw the lady kind of go up in the air a little bit, and she flew, and she went down with a thud somewhere. And for a few seconds, I was completely benumbed. And my first thoughts, I have to be frank, were not of Swami. The first thought was that, oh my God, they are going to pull me out of the car and they're going to beat me. And I will be in the hospital with multiple fractures. That was actually my first thought, because that's how, Delhi roads are, and if a car hits a smaller vehicle, then that's what happens to the driver. It's road rage, right? And then I started thinking about, well, it's not just me that they'll beat, they'll probably smash up the car also. So I was in that very self-centered and self-pitying kind of thought process. And it went on for a few minutes. And then I realized that nobody is coming towards me. And then, where is everybody? They're all kind of crowded around that lady who had fallen. And the thought then suddenly changed. How is she? She might need help. She might need to be rushed to the hospital. So somehow my fear just vanished. Instinctively, I just opened the car and went out to ask about her. I don't know what happened. It just changed. My whole state of mind just changed. I went out. And as I went out, the first thing that I heard was that man turned towards me and he says, "Thank you, Bhai Sahab." Now, again, this is not what you expect to hear. As I was walking out, I was telling myself, am I doing the right thing? But I said, no, I have to help her. And I heard, "Thank you." And then he went on. He said, "Thank you that you put the brakes on time. If you had not braked on time, she would have been really hurt." And then he went on a rant. "Oh, she never listens to me. I told her not to cross the road, but she is not used to listening to me. So she was trying to cross the road." And then he went on. And here I am thinking that in Delhi, I've hit somebody. That person has been hit, and the husband of that lady is saying thank you to me. I mean, only Swami can manage this kind of situation. But I was very curious. I actually asked him, "Do you need help? Do you need to go to a hospital?" And he said, no, she's fine. And then I realized how she was fine is that the road had been dug at that point. It was fresh earth. There were no stones, no bricks, nothing. It was fresh earth. There was a mound of earth, and she had landed on that fresh mound of earth, which provided the cushioning, and she was absolutely fine, absolutely safe. No scratch to her, no scratch to me. I just sat back in the car and drove off. And believe me, it was after a few minutes that I thought of Swami and said, oh my God, he had just completely changed the situation. It could have gone anywhere. If that man had blamed me, there were 50 people standing near me. They would have all beaten me. There was no doubt about it. But that man said, thank you. And so, it's really funny how Swami can change around things without you even knowing. Even though I did not have the presence of mind, my first response was not a prayer to Swami, but he was there. And I actually had the great privilege to narrate this experience in front of Swami in Trai. And the smile on his face when I said that the man said thank you gave it all. I knew he was the one who had orchestrated this drama. And he was the one who had really saved my life that day. So as I said, he is there. He is there taking care of us. He knows the point at which we'll break, but he will save us from that. Right. So now I'll fast forward to the time where I was now studying in Parthi. He was that, like I said, that walking, talking God. And it's so beautiful how he, like I said, he pulls the curtain on, yes, I am the person in front of you, but I'm still the person on that beautiful framed photograph that hangs wherever it hangs. So it was a Sunday afternoon, darshan time, and Swami was coming. He had taken his round. I was sitting, in the first block where all the boys sit. And from a distance, he started to talk to me. He started to speak with me. And the first thing he said was, I was there. So I wasn't sure if he's speaking with me because, many times during the times, when we were students, he used to talk about, he used to actually come and sit and talk to Professor Anil Kumar, a lot of other teachers, professors, and he used to refer to things that were going on in the hostel or the institute. So I thought I wasn't sure if he's speaking with me or somebody else. And, he was talking about some event that happened in the institute. But he said, I was there. And then he said, very good program, very happy. I saw it all. Maine sab dekha. And then he kind of made a gesture. He said, they gave Aarti, I was there. They gave Aarti, I was there. And he ended with, he started with, I was there, ended with, I was there. Maine sab dekha. So I was a little confused, what is he speaking about? I had no clue what he actually was speaking about. But I thought, okay, maybe I will come to know. So after darshans, we asked, did something happen in the hostel? Did something happen in the institute? Nobody seemed to know anything. So I also kind of, relegated to the back of my memory. Okay, some Swami speaking about something, and we'll probably know in good time what that was. And it wasn't until a few days later when I called home. And we in those days there were no mobile phones, and we would not call home that often. I was really bad at calling home regularly. So I just happened to call a few days later, and my mother was very excited. She was saying, we had a Bal Vikas camp, and so many students, 30-40 Bal Vikas students, they actually stayed overnight. We had a sleepover camp. It was a 2-day camp, and there were so many activities. The point she had not reached was she actually wanted me to tell Swami about it. But she had not reached that point. She was just telling me all the things that had happened, and I still could not connect it with what Swami was speaking. I was just saying, okay. And then finally she said, the closing program was so beautiful. We had so many people come in to do that. And then she mentioned one alumni, that alumni had come, he spoke to the students, they were so happy. And then he gave Aarti to Swami. And when she said he gave Aarti to Swami, that's when I connected. And then I asked her, what day was it? And it was that Sunday. And probably Swami was sitting there receiving the Aarti when he was telling me I was there. And he had told exactly everything what was going on there. I did not have a clue, but he was there and he was here. And here he was narrating what was going on there. So, he gave those glimpses of himself being everywhere, knowing everything that's going on, really being omnipresent.
Bhai, I'm sorry to come in as you speak because we've been in the same class. We have seen Swami around the same time. So there is another beautiful incident. I mean, you mentioned Sunday evening. I remember it was March, like March. It is in Mumbai, and Perth is always hot. One of those evenings, and this incident is completely the opposite of what Swami did there. There he showed his omnipresence. I mean, this was this evening. He came out, and there were students who were supposed to speak. There was a student brother who was supposed to speak. Swami came to Warden sir, and Swami asked, who's the speaker for the day? So Warden sir got up and said, Swami Unnikrishnan. And then I was sitting there in one corner, I mean, one among 500. Swami came to you and Swami asked, are you Unnikrishnan? I mean, the moment Swami asked that, I couldn't control myself. I mean, Amit Ahuja, Unnikrishnan, I couldn't see the correlation anywhere. But yeah, I mean, I laughed in my mind. Swami came walking, and then Swami looked at me and asked, what is your name? I mean, I wasn't ready for that. So then I got up and I told Swami Jai Shankar. I mean, he knows our names 100 births before. He knows our names 100 birth hence. And then he's coming and he's asking our names. The same Lord who shows he's omnipresent also has this side of it, and he tests you, right? So then he came and asked, what's your name? I told Swami Jai Shankar. He listened to me 2 times and they said, okay, go back and sit.
But yeah, I remember I used to call you by other names also, right?
So, I mean, Swami has his unique style, right? So, and I would sit with the music group. I was part of the bhajan group. So, Swami would look at me and call me a harmonium boy. He would call me tabla boy. So, there was this one day, he asked me, which class are you studying in? So, I said, Swami, MBA. So, Swami said, Arey, you are such a small boy. Who gave you admission? You look like 3 mangoes. So, I said, I didn't understand the meaning of what Swami meant by 3 mangoes. Then Swami demonstrated. Swami said, you're so small like 3 mangoes, you keep 3 mangoes on top of each other, that's how small you are. And then he would call you, he started calling me 3 mangoes. It went on for a while. Obviously, when you think of it now, you can laugh. But when Swami would call you 3 mangoes, people all around would laugh. So is there any name by which Swami would call you by?
Yeah, Swami, when I started to, of course, the first name he called me was Bad Boy. But when I started to, when I took admission and I started to attend classes, he used to most often call me Delhi Boy. And very often it's also called me Coconut Tree. And when my brother and I were together, he would definitely call us Coconut Trees. And I really don't think he has called me by this name, Amit. But I remember one instance where he had called me by the name Ajit. I remember we were in the interview room, we were coming out, and he went out before us, and he started to speak to somebody in the veranda. And then suddenly he turned around and said, "Hey, Ajit, come here." And I actually looked behind myself, and somebody poked me from behind, and he was actually calling to me. So yes, he calls us by different names, and like I said, he's not just different names, different forms. He used to call with us playfully, what is your name? And then I think, different boys had different names. But really, I believe he's not just all names, all forms, but he's also the formless. This pertains to something that a little story about my maternal grandfather, my Nanaji. He was a freedom fighter. He participated in the Indian freedom fight, and he was actually part of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose IRA. But that was years ago. We have always grown up to know him as a very, very strict disciplinarian, right? He had a very set schedule. He would wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning, and he would take a bath with cold water every day. No matter how cold or warm it is outside, he would take a cold water bath every day morning at 4 a.m. And he wasn't very strict in the sense that he wouldn't go around telling you what to do, what not to do. In fact, he was very patient. But with his own lifestyle, he was very, very strict disciplinarian, to the point that sometimes being rigid. What was interesting about him was that he was a Arya Samaji. And in that form of faith or whatever, you don't really do idol worship. So when my mother had started, she got into Swami's fold, he never actually questioned or even stopped us from that. But he himself wasn't, in that. So I have never known to see him go to a temple or a mandir or offer prayers. He would offer, Arya Samajis do havans. So he would sit for that havan on some occasions, right? There's a house warming ceremony or something, he would do that. But otherwise, he was just content being with himself. Now when I got admission in Parthi and my sister went to Anantapur, Ashok was already in Vrindavan. That around that time, my Mamaji's daughters, which are his granddaughters, they also got admission in the primary school. So he had just started to visit Parthi to see them. Actually, not to see Swami, but to see them. And this happened after I had finished MBA. That same year, 2002, somewhere between Dasara and birthday time, Swami called our family for an interview. And he was, my Nanaji and Naniji were also there. And it was interesting because he was not worshipping that form or that idol at all. But he came in the interview room. He didn't speak much, but I remember Swami turning to him and said, "How are you?" And Swami took his hand and he kind of melted in that, and he didn't say anything. And then Swami said, "Very good man, very pure man, very pious." It was interesting because he was not the religious kind who would do any worship around it. Swami said, "Very good, very pious." And I saw a person, who for 70 years was very steadfast and rigid in his faith, kind of just change. From that point on till almost 10, 12 years later, till he was in his firm health, two things he did. Every few weeks, he would come to Puttaparthi to have Swami's darshan. And not only that, he actually changed his morning whatever schedule, and he added Suprabhatam to it. So, it's funny that a person who is so steadfast, so rigid that this is the way it is, it will not change, he was changed in an instance. Because probably my grandfather's all internal prayers or whatever were to the formless. Or maybe it was to somebody he could have put a form to. And then, my grandfather actually related that when he was in the IRA, this was before India got freedom, he had been caught with a few other revolutionaries in Burma. And he was imprisoned for a few months, and they were to be executed. On the morning, in the wee hours, about 4 a.m. of their execution, they were actually all able to escape. And now he would actually attribute that to Swami and said, he was with me all the time, and I just didn't know what was happening. So yes, he is there, whether we know it, we don't know it. He's just there, and whoever you trying to connect with, it is reaching with him, and he's responding to it. And talking about connecting with Swami, Swami students have used a very interesting instrument to connect with Swami, and that's a letter. Right? We've all given letters to Swami, and we've all tried to use that as a bridge to kind of speak with him. So I remember, Siddharth had a very interesting experience with letters. So Siddharth, why don't you tell us about that?
No, I think, letters has been a very interesting way to connect. Even today, I think students and even devotees, all of us, connect with Swami. Even post Mahasamadhi, we leave the letters in the basket, and, there's a clear faith that it reaches Swami. and collecting or reminding myself of that experience during our days, when we lived with Swami in that particular moment. This was, I think, year 2000, if I'm right. And Swami used to walk out after the interviews and sit on the chair, which is which was, even now it is kept next to Mahasamadhi, that exactly the place, that other pillar on the Jain side, where a chair was kept, and Swami will walk and then come and sit there. And when he used to walk, today where we see Mahasamadhi, there used to be a white platform where Swami used to give discourses. So among the students, we used to call it as a Ganesh portico, because there is Lord Ganesha's statue just behind, and that's why it is called as Ganesh portico. And Swami used to walk down, and when he used to walk from the inner interview room and move towards that chair, that was the phase when he'll walk very gently, very slowly, and all the boys who are sitting in the first row will be sitting with the letters in their hand, literally, the letters between the two palms, and waiting for Swami to kind of call. And that was a phase when anybody who has a letter in their hand, Swami will just say like this, and the boy will run on the 2-3 steps and then kneel in front of Swami, and then you get a private audience with Swami even for a few seconds. So that was a golden period, and a time came when practically everybody sitting on the first line had a letter in their hand. And a strange episode, why do I remember this, is I was one of them in that in the first line, and unfortunately I had actually nothing to communicate to Swami. So I don't know what, I had not written any letter per se, but because I saw this in the entire, everybody in my queue in the row was sitting with a letter, immediately I snatched one blank piece of paper and actually folded it and sat in front of Swami as if it's a letter. You can imagine the daring that I could do, just to have blank sheet of paper as if it's a letter. And strangely, and Swami knows everything, as you said earlier, that omnipresence. And Swami walked that day. Swami did not take anybody's letter. He just looked at all of us and then walked and went and sat on his chair. And moment he sat on his chair, obviously Anil Kumar sir, Swami's translator, was sitting just next to Swami's chair below. And he just got up and said, Swami, boys are, having letters in the hand. You would like to take some letters. Swami just kind of, brushed it aside and did not kind of respond to him. And then he had to, he's typically does for boys. So he just got up once again and says, Swami, some boys may have some emergency to kind of, communicate to you. So Swami just looked at him very sternly and then thumped his chest and said, my boys will never have emergencies. This is a statement which I was right below and I could hear directly. My boys will never have emergencies. And after that, obviously there was a pin drop silence. Nobody spoke, because such a historic statement Swami made. It's like an assurance. And if I, typically when he may say my boys, but my has means somebody who follows Swami's teachings. And boys per se, if we extend this concept, it's all of us as Sai family, all the devotees across the world. Once we follow his teachings, there'll be absolutely no emergencies. And that is something which was a very beautiful lesson. That was a phase, very golden phase, beautiful nuggets of this kind of experiences, we could kind of witness in those moments. And that is something which came into my mind, that when we communicate through letters, even today, none of us should feel that Swami's physical form is not there. Even if we communicate through letters, and if we follow his teachings, we are his boys, irrespective of genders. We are his devotees, and no emergencies will touch us once we follow his teachings. So that was a beautiful message we enjoyed in that era when brother Amit also was with us in that time. So and one last thing is, I think that is the Ganesh portico which we just spoke about. That is the platform which is very memorable for a lot of us as students, because Swami used to stand and wait for us after Gram Seva. Swami used to stand and call us to speak. That was the time, also the stage where Swami narrated a lot of discourses from there. So it has a very powerful platform for all of us as a memory. And that's why Ganesh portico per se for students even till today is one of the very special place for all of us in our hearts. So I just thought, that is something which is a beautiful message from Swami that we recollect on this day. So
Thank you so much. Actually, that's a great segue into what I wanted to narrate next. This also happened in the Ganesh portico, and I was trying to also connect it that he is what you spoke about, the divine assurance, there was another way he kind of gave that divine assurance, um, and that was for me personally, and that happened in Ganesh Portico. So this was in my second year of MBA, and you probably all know this, we went through together. In the first year, Swami showed his love and benevolence, with very frequent interactions and all of that, right? So attention and he used to often call and speak, and we were there. And the second year, we actually saw the other side of the coin, his tough love. And when you get the tough love, you are what they call out of form. You are out of sight, but not out of mind. That is his way of probably teaching you other things, that we as humans don't always respond to love. We sometimes need the stick, to kind of learn other lessons. So he used that very effectively. The beautiful part is he will ignore you. He will ignore you as if you don't exist. But at no point will you ever feel slighted. You will only want more of him. And I'm saying that because it was never that he looked at me with any kind of negativity. It was just that he would not look at me. And I could be sitting anywhere. I could be in the first row, second row, next to his chair, in front of his chair, last row, and he will make sure that he's communicating to me that he's avoiding me. That's also the beautiful point, wherever I was. So he will look at everybody, everybody in a row he will look at, and when it is my head, it will just avoid it, and then he'll continue looking at the other people. So he used to keep rubbing it that, I am avoiding you. And he did that for more than a year. So first year, first 12 months were beautiful. You're in heaven, verily the heaven. There can be nothing more. And then suddenly this phase starts. And you know how it is, it's a little bit of disbelief, and then there's you are fantasizing, no, it's going to be over very soon, it'll be back. And then that acceptance, slowly the acceptance comes, and then you accept it. And so I had accepted it, but as we were getting to the end of second year, I had started to become a little worried. And I was like, okay, it's fine, Swami, you're teaching me lessons, you're forcing me to introspect, you want me to become better, you want me to do all of those things, perfect, but please, I don't want to finish my MBA and just go away in the state of affairs being like this. That will be horrible. You have showered so much love, attention, you just can't do this. And for me, that end date was March 31st, when we had the last exam. And then I realized that actually end date will be closer to March 18th or 20th, when he will go to Vrindavan. So I had fewer days. And I remember around February, when the March was really lurking near, I started to panic. I really started to panic that, nothing is changing. Nothing seems to be moving him. He's not responding to anything. And then, I kind of hanged my hopes, if I may say, on this gratitude day. That's the day when all the passing batches get a chance, where Swami sits at that Ganesh Portico on his chair, and we all get an opportunity to put some program in front of him and then get photographs, class photographs or room photographs or whatever with him. And that is where I was hanging all my hopes on. And just like that first time when I had wanted to have Pad Namaskar of him, this time also I started to do a lot of scenarios that how will I somehow get to speak with him, but I was wiser this time and realized, it's not going to work. He'll do what he has to do. So I stopped kind of making scenarios. I had only one prayer to him. I said, Swami, I want to stand next to you in that photograph, so that I can at least, maybe I'll hold your hand. But I didn't feel comfortable doing that. You're in front of the Kulwant Hall. There are thousands of people. You can't just do that. You're not a kid. And that would also be breach of discipline. So I was a little confused, but I said, okay, Swami, let me just stand next to you. I'm anyways tall, I will be in the last line, I will be just close, I'll somehow brush my body against your body. I just want to touch you once. That was all my prayer. So finally the day came, the program happened, the photographs started, and the session started, and classes would go, come back, and then it was our turn. And as luck would have it, I wasn't fast enough or whatever, so I was not next to him. There was one person between me and Swami, and I was definitely not very happy about it, disappointed. And I remember standing in that place, and the only thing in my mind was that, Swami, this is the last chance. You just can't let it be like this. I will never ever, if there is one time I have felt that it is all over, it is the depth of my disappointment, of my sorrow. It was that one moment. I didn't want that photograph moment to get over and just go back without anything from Swami. It really was like that. That's how I was feeling from inside. It was all over. And then while I was thinking, that photograph was over, it hardly takes 4 or 5 seconds, and you were there, and people had started to move out, and I was crestfallen. My heart was crying. And then suddenly I felt somebody trying to catch my hand, and I felt a very firm grip. And I looked on this side, because I didn't know why the person standing next to me was holding me. But the person holding me was Swami. He was not looking at me, but he held my hand firmly, and he didn't let me move. And he continued to hold my hand. So this class, our class that I had gotten a photograph with, they went back. The next batch came. I remember it was the physics class. They came. They got their photograph, and I actually got 2 photographs, one with MB and one with physics. And he continued to hold my hand, but never looked at me. And when that photograph was over, he let go of my hand. And that's when I walked back with tears in my eyes, because he had just signaled to me that he is that inner being. He listens to every prayer, and he will not fail us. He is testing us, yes, he will continue to test us, but he will not fail us. He is that anchor who is holding on to us. He has us firmly in his grip. Whatever we feel, however bad, however hopeless the situation is, he is there. But he's just testing us. We have to go with that confidence. And he gave that faith, he gave that confidence as his parting gift. And I think that is something I carry most dearly with me, not just this lifetime, probably many, many lifetimes. I think he gave that invaluable gift. And I'm just cognizant of time. So I'll just quickly talk about one incident which happened a couple of years ago, where he has become verily the Hridayavasi. We don't have the luxury to say, Swami, I want to hold your hand. Swami, I want your Pad Namaskar. That era is gone. We were so fortunate. We were there. We felt his love. He played with us. We were there. But now we can only talk to the Swami in our heart. And about 2018, about the end of 2018. So I was having a tough time at work. And Swami has over the years taught that, like I said, he will test us. There will be tough situations, but they get resolved. And I usually, yes, sometimes you get perturbed, but that doesn't last very long. I just let it go, and I just accept whatever is happening. But this time, it was just becoming worse. It was not, and I think worst of all, I was getting impacted by it more and more. And as most of us humans do, when we are in a tough situation, we always find a fall person. We kind of blame it on one or two people. That's our way of dealing with the situation, at least my way. And I think a lot of us humans do that. We don't say the human is tough, we start blaming a person. So I had also started to blame a person. And like they say, what is the shape of worry? We don't know what the shape of worry is, but all we know is it starts to accumulate here. It just envelops us. So it had become so bad that I could not sleep at night. And pre-COVID, I used to travel for work almost every day, and I used to be in different cities. So the first night I could not sleep, I blamed it on a bad mattress in that hotel. The second night I said, oh, it was really hot, I could not sleep. Third night I could not sleep, I said it was very cold, I could not sleep. And this was the fourth night, it was a Thursday night. I remember I was trying to sleep, my eyes was hurting because I had not been able to sleep for 3 nights, and this was the fourth night. I think that night I finally got out of my, I didn't say get out, but I started to also ask Swami for help. Till then it was, Swami was secondary, but the primary was my angst with that person and the situation and all that. And I said, Swami, I can't take this anymore. I just can't take it. This is not sustainable. I don't know what will happen. I can't take this. And I remember as I was kind of trying to drift into sleep, his voice, his inimitable voice, he just said 2 sentences. He says, why do you worry about him? He actually named the person. The beauty is he named the person. Why do you worry about him? I am here. That's it. And I immediately woke up with tears in my eyes. And whatever that balloon of worry, whatever that was, he had pricked it. It did not exist anymore. And I was teary-eyed that night, and I slept really well after that. And not just that, I think in a few months post that I realized that he had completely resolved that situation. So he keeps reminding us time and again that he is there. He's taking care of us. He is holding on to us. We just have to have that faith and confidence that he is there. And I think with that, I will just end the session with a prayer that he blesses all of us, not just with good health, not just with prosperity, but also the awareness that he is always with us in our hearts, wherever we are. He's taking care of us. It does not matter what form or name we are taking. He knows the situation, he's watching it, he's testing us, but he will take care of us. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you so much, Bhai. Indeed, honor, privilege, and complete joy listening to his story as told by you. All of us have our stories, but then it's so wonderful, isn't it, to listen to Swami's stories, and even something as small as an accident. I mean, Swami wasn't involved anywhere. Yet, as devotees, we are able to place Swami in that situation, and we know that that unseen hand, or in your case, a leg, you press a brake on time and he slowed the car down, so was his. He is there, present at all times with us, and he is indeed the divine anchor. This only, the experiences only go and reassure us or reaffirm our faith in him, that he is a divine anchor and we place all our faith in him and he guides us through. Thank you so much, Bhai. And as we go on, there are questions that are coming through, posted by different people. So there is a question: can you narrate any experiences from your participation in the convocation drama? Convocation drama is fun time. I mean, it's a big event. There are Swami. It's directed by Swami, the divine director. Swami is personally involved in in almost everything. You dialogue and expression, a smile. A person who's not having a dialogue, who simply has to stand muted, his expressions are also noted by Swami. So as something as insignificant as that is also directed by Swami, and obviously a lot of things go inside the drama. Any experiences that you would have?
Actually, so I remember sitting in the interview room, and Swami used to actually enact, or rather, speak the dialogues the way they used to be spoken. And I was really hopeless. I'm not, I think my right brain is kind of non-existent. So he didn't even try it with me. But to the main characters, he a lot. But what actually came to my mind immediately was after the drama, you know, he was backstage, and in this drama, both me and my brother were there. So he, after the backstage, the chief guest that year was the HRD minister of India, and Swami was so happy, and he was saying, "My boys, look, they do drama. They come from different walks of life." And then suddenly he saw me and my brother standing, and he said, "Look at them. They're coconut trees." and and then he went on to tell about a coconut tree to the HRD minister, and he said, a coconut, the water is so sweet, but the coconut tree is always next to the sea, and the sea water is saline. But the coconut tree gives you sweet water. It grows next to saline water, but it gives you sweet water. And he suddenly turned towards me and said, "Always be like a coconut tree." So that's what I immediately remembered, when we spoke about that.
I mean, beautiful, isn't it? I mean, could we ever think that we would love to be called a coconut tree? But then when Swami calls it, he can call you anything. He can call you a donapata, or he can call you a 3 mangoes, or he can call you anything, and you will feel wonderful. And not only will you feel wonderful, you will keep thinking about it for the rest of your life. And there is a message behind everything that he says, isn't it?
Sure.
Okay, there's another question, Bhai. So, couple of questions, if I can summarize it. How do we overcome conflicts in our daily life, and how do we ask Swami to help us?
Like I said, see, everybody kind of associates with Swami in different ways. One way that I have, I will not say, we all struggle with our daily conflicts. There are so many of them, with people, with everything that's going on around us. It's not easy, and I think social media has made it much worse. But the way I try to deal with it is, like I said, I try not to blame people. It's very difficult, actually, because there are people in front of us. Let's say somebody comes and says a few harsh words to me, and he does it repeatedly, right? So naturally, I'm inclined to put a blame on him. But I try to the extent possible to get people out of the equation, and just look at it a little more objectively and say, okay, maybe if I was in this position, I would also be doing this thing, right? Maybe, so get myself in their shoes also, but try to look without the people in it. That's one. And I think ultimately it is nothing else but a prayer that works. I always think that a situation that he has put us in, where we are facing conflicts, where we sometimes feel lost, is a test that he is giving. And when I look at it as a test, my attitude towards it changes. Now, I'm not trying to get the better of the person or a group of people. I'm not trying to win that game with them. It is a test, and I have to pass this test as seen by Swami. Swami has to approve that this test I have passed. So how should my conduct be in that test? Right? It's a little bit esoteric, but if that is the thinking we apply to it, I feel he will give guidance. He gives guidance, and I can also tell you, he gives guidance through different people. It's not that always he will come in a dream, or that his voice will speak. Many times he will speak through other people. And I think that is also what he's trying to teach us. Can we see him in other people? Sometimes we just shut out other people because we don't like them, but what they're saying might be correct. Right. So if I take it as a test, that is a test Swami is giving me, he's challenging me. He basically wants me to, maybe to work on some of my aspects, some of my behavioral aspects. And if I take that as a challenge, then the focus is on me. What can I do? And it, our mind naturally says, oh, that person has done so much wrong. But I don't bother about how much wrong he has done. I'm just focusing on that little bit that I can improve myself. I think that's the way I have been able to, at least be at peace with myself. The situation over time will always resolve itself, as Swami has shown time and time over again.
One last
That's all.
question, Bhai. How easy or difficult is it to follow the path of Dharma or Swami's teachings in daily work? Have you ever been in a dilemma like this, and how was it resolved by Swami?
Oh, yes. Like I said, he gives his tests every day, and sometimes they continue for months. If you have to go through the ringer, you have to be squeezed, you will be. You will face all kind of situations. It will be terrible. It could be at work, it could be in the family, or extended relationships, it could be anywhere. But he gives you tough times, and I think the answer is still the same. I look at it as, it's as education, spiritual education, and think of it like going to school. You go to a school, you are tested, but we don't detest those tests, we prepare for those tests. And when I give a test and I pass one test, I actually am promoted to a higher grade, where I have to take studies which are a little more difficult, and the testing is also more difficult. So if you treat life as a series of tests, and the idea of a test is that I have to learn something, or I have to, in our case, unlearn some of our bad things that Swami doesn't want us to do, then it is nothing more than series of tests where I am working on myself and my behavior and my skills. It has got nothing to do with anybody else. So that's what I'm saying. You have to, at least that has worked with me. I try to focus on myself as to how I can use this situation to work on my patience, my anger, my empathy. And probably that's what Swami is trying to enhance. And I just put the focus away from everybody else. Yes, it will be a long time. I will be put through the test, but he will over time resolve the situation. That's been my response.
Wonderfully answered by. I think Bhagwan keeps on telling us, test is his taste.
Yes,
He gives
absolutely.
us a test. He also gives you whatever is required to overcome it. And like absolutely beautifully put it by you. As soon as you pass a test, you move on to the next level. So then it's like what Siddharth also said, the assurance that Bhagwan is always there, and there'll be nothing, there'll be no emergencies. So that assurance is always there. And how many times has he told us that he's always there with us, and he's there to help us, support us, guide us. He is in you, above you, intelligent. I mean, we have heard it so many times through Swami's words, right? I mean, it's beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful. Even reminiscing those thoughts. And on behalf of all the devotees of Mumbai, it's not only Mumbai, devotees from Mumbai, they're all around the world. This digital age has got all of us together. We have devotees all around the world as we speak. I mean, it's morning there, it's evening here, it's late evening in Singapore. We have devotees all over who have gathered to listen to his story as told by you. So, on behalf of all the devotees from Mumbai, our gratitude and thank you for being with us today. We will end today's session with समस्तलोका समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय. Thank you, Sai Ram.